Hello and welcome to this Facebook Live. Mercury Retrograde is a blessing, and in this live I'm going to explain to you why Mercury Retrograde is a blessing and how you can use that in your business, and because it's not as scary as it is, trust me. So I'm going to dive into how you can use this Mercury retrograde in your advantage. But before that, I really want to stress that the upcoming full moon, which is also a lunar eclipse, can be a little bit intense. We have the full moon in Sagittarius tomorrow, and whenever there's a full moon, our emotions are higher. Hi Wendy. Our emotions are higher, we feel a lot of things are going on, and the full moon is the peak phase of the lunar cycle. It is where everything gets heightened, everything gets lit up, because the full moon, if you think about it, it's like this bright thing in the sky, and while the night is supposed to be dark and black. Wendy, I'm just gonna check with you because I don't know by heart. It's 1:14 in the afternoon, European time, and it's 7:14 a.m. for Eastern Daylight Time. Thank you for checking that. I don't know all the names by heart. I was busy with the forecast for June. So it's going to be in the afternoon for us, in the morning for everybody in the US. Because everything is highlighted, not just our good side, our pretty side, our happy face is being shown, but also our darkness, our shadows, our things that we tend to want to hide are being highlighted. When there is a lunar eclipse, which means that the Earth will move between the Sun and the Moon, so we actually will see the Moon being, a shadow is casted on the Moon, which usually tends to give this sort of reddish color to the Moon. I mean, we cannot really see the eclipse here, but it is a complete eclipse, so the moon will be completely dark. We might be able to see it partly here in Europe, but I'm not 100% sure at what time the eclipse is. Wait, I'm gonna look that up because now I'm curious. There's a very easy way to look that up, and of course I can't find it. I will get back to you when exactly the eclipse is, because it doesn't happen at the same time as the full moon. But just be mindful, because there is an eclipse, there is this extra shadow side, this extra darkness added to the full moon. So when you do a full moon ritual, make sure that if you're ready to release things, that you wait like a day or two, because things can tend to pop up out of nowhere and bite you in the ass when you didn't expect it. So allow yourself this grace time around this lunar eclipse, because eclipses tend to link things back to previous eclipses. So make sure that you open yourself up to receiving whatever comes up for you. There's so much more that I can say about this full moon, but this week I actually want to focus on we are going to have a Sagittarius full moon. We're going to focus on the Mercury retrograde, which is happening at the end of this week. A lot of people people know the full moon, the new moon, and they probably also heard about Mercury retrograde, because it's one of those things that gets talked about a lot, not just in the astrological circles, but also at other places. And it tends to get a very bad rap because it disturbs things. Things are kind of muddy and it's harder to see and get to the point when there's a Mercury retrograde. But I love them. And you should too. Because for the very simple reason that it is a time for you to assess where you are at and where your business is at. We're not really taught to pause and to look at what is going on. We are just encouraged to keep going because you have this goal in mind that you have to work hard and hustle to get there. Now, by now, most of you probably know that that's not the way to go. But how can you trust more and move more with that energy so that you're able to tune into that and go with the flow? The basics. What is a Mercury retrograde actually? Mercury retrograde, or a retrograde, is when the planet appears to be moving backwards from our perspective here on the Earth. In reality, planets do not move backwards. All of the planets have a retrograde. The faster the planet moves, the shorter the retrograde. The slower the planet moves, the longer the retrograde. So for instance, Saturn just stationed retrograde, and it retrogrades for about roughly 4 months. Pluto stationed retrograde a while back, stays in retrograde for 5 to 6 months. Jupiter is going to go into retrograde. It's 3 to 4 months. So Mercury is the fastest moving planet. The Sun and the Moon never go into retrograde, but Mercury is the fastest moving planet. Therefore, the retrograde period is the shortest and the one that we experience the most. Mercury is what we call a personal planet, so its effect will be felt more than Saturn or Jupiter or Pluto will feel, or even Uranus or Neptune, because they shift slower. I mean, imagine if you're driving 100 kilometers an hour and you suddenly hit the brakes. You're gonna notice that. But if you drive 5 kilometers an hour and you hit the brakes, I mean, you will feel it, but it's more like a gradual, like, oh, we have stopped. Whereas the 100 kilometers an hour is like, hit the brakes, and you're just like, whew, okay, well, hello, we stopped. My hair is adding to drama. Leo style. So when Mercury turns retrograde, we feel it more intensely, and we actually notice it more on a day-to-day level. Mercury rules our communication. It rules the way that we connect. It rules technology. It rules the internet. Not the internet, it generally rules technology. So when a planet turns retrograde, the energy is turned from outward to inward. So it really slows things down in that area where the planet rules. So our communication, there are a lot of misunderstandings happening around a Mercury retrograde. Generally, a lot of tech glitches happen during Mercury retrograde. It doesn't mean that like when Mercury is still direct, nothing happens, but it tends to happen more. So if you are in the middle of a launch next week, or there's something really important that you have to do, double check everything. For instance, if you have a really important meeting with a client or with a potential client, make sure that you double check, you send out the right link, that you have the time correctly, because this is a time where things get a little bit blurry and it's a little bit harder to make sure that you have everything correctly. This year we will have all of our Mercury retrogrades in air signs. Last year they were in water signs. Water signs are more emotional, more empathic, they feel into things. So those retrogrades tend to be more on the emotional side, where we are experiencing much more what happens around us. When we have the Mercury retrogrades in air signs, what we have this year, we had one at the beginning in Aquarius, this one is going to be in Gemini, and the next one will be in Libra. It actually encouraged us to use our rational mind, but because Mercury retrograde tends to be a reflective time, and this is where like the blessing part comes in, because we're so used to just going all the time and not stopping. Mercury retrograde is going 100 kilometers an hour, hitting the brakes, and then realizing, oh, whoa, this is where I was going. Because when you drive really fast, you don't really see where you are. When you said, you gotta love air signs, yes. And I love my people with air signs. Also, my husband is also one. Double Gemini. But what happens is when you go that fast, you have no idea of the scenery. You have no idea where you're actually heading because you're so fast that you can't really suddenly change directions. Mercury retrograde is the one that like hits the brakes. I think, look around. Where are you? What are you doing? And make sure that the direction you're headed in is the direction you want to go. Because this upcoming retrograde is in Gemini, it's really important for you and in your business, first of all, to hit that pause button. And it doesn't mean like drop everything and don't do everything for the next 3 weeks, but it does encourage you to have this reflective moment. I love these check-in moments. I usually check in every quarter anyway, but this Mercury retrograde, because it happens close to, well, we're not close to the third quarter yet, but we're ramping up to the third quarter. I love to use that time to set myself up to look at what it is that I want to do for the next 2 quarters. What it is that I want to do in Q3 and Q4. But I don't do that based on only looking at the future. I look at what have I done in the past few months? How can I reflect on what was successful, what wasn't? And because it is in Gemini, it really rules our rational mind. It also is connected to the way that we learn things, the way that we develop ourselves by taking new information in. And use your rational mind, but again, use that reflective power of the retrograde to look at, have I been using my rational mind too much? Is there a way that I can tune more into my intuition? Can I listen more? Can I allow myself to sit back? Because what Gemini likes to do is it likes to continue getting new information. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's interesting. So keep like grabbing new things without actually implementing them. Mercury retrograde is a really good time to reflect and to integrate. It's not so much about doing new things, coming up with new ideas. Yes, you might feel inspired, but it's a good time if some inspiration comes up, write it down and leave it for a bit. Sit with it. Let it simmer for a while before you actually start to add things on and really take action to bring that idea into the world. I really like the idea of Mercury retrograde as this evaluation time. What am I doing? What is going well? What isn't? How can I course correct? And then when Mercury starts to slowly pick up speed again, you will feel the momentum going. So what happens is a retrograde is not like it actually stops directly. It's not like it really hits the brakes, like I mentioned. It slowly hits the brakes. So Mercury already has started slowing down. for the past 2 weeks. And then when it stations, when it goes backwards, it also goes backwards a little bit slower, then a little bit faster, and by the time at the end of the retrograde, it goes slower again. We call it stations. What station is basically like almost like a standstill, where it's not really moving forward and it's not really moving backwards, it's just starting to move forward again. And what we feel, because Mercury is slowing down, communication is slowing down, but also the communication to ourselves. That is not just the outward communication, but also the conversation that you have with your inner self. Be okay with this sort of, it's almost like, I just see this image of being on a roller coaster where you have this drop, where you're like, before you actually go faster again, where you feel like your stomach is like, that kind of feeling is around when Mercury stations, either direct or retrograde. Is this, and then we go. So be okay, because we have the full moon lunar eclipse, so the eclipse season is starting. We have Mercury retrograde. There's like, oh, we have Saturn is also in retrograde already. There's so much added invitation to relax and to not push through, because this is definitely not a week to have too high expectations on yourself and on your business. So during the retrograde, when it starts on the 29th, make sure that you give yourself the time and space to reflect, to review, to reassess, like what's going on, how do I want to continue. It doesn't mean that you have to take all of those weeks off, but I want you to at least have one afternoon where you sit down with your journal and reflect on it. A lot of people think Mercury retrograde is so unpractical because, yes, things tend to like get a little bit wonky. By the way, make a backup of your computer, of your phone, so if something breaks down, you have a backup to rely on. But I want you to feel empowered about this. I want you to start being excited, like I am, where you know that this might not be the easiest time, but you know, sometimes we need a little bit more challenge to grow. Think about the lotus. When I lived in Thailand, we literally had a whole pond full of lotuses, which, by the way, they spread like weed. We couldn't get rid of them. Like, our pond was completely swamped with lotuses. They're beautiful, but... And this is exactly the analogy that I want you to think of. When you dig deep in the mud and you struggle a bit, like you are able to go through that time that maybe is a little bit uncomfortable. But in the end, there will be this beautiful lotus flower. And once it's there, it will spread like crazy. There will be so many lotuses. And you'll be in full bloom before you even realize it. But you have to take the time to go through the mud, through the water, so that the flower bud can come above the water level and then starts to bloom. That is something that I want you to remember during this Mercury retrograde. It's definitely not the easiest time, because all of the other planetary configurations at the moment. But this is where we grow. If you trust what is going on, and if you give yourself credit to go through this gracefully, you're gonna love it as much as I do. If you're watching the replay, let me know if this is something that you look forward to, that you're excited about, to start working with this, because it's such a powerful energy. And if you want to make sure that you use this retrograde in the biggest advantage possible, let me know. We can book a call. I can walk you through what is going to happen for you and how you can optimize the way that you work, the way that you schedule your time, schedule your Mercury retrogrades, because they happen in a specific location for you in your life, a specific area of your life, I should say. And if you know that, it helps you to even utilize that moment of reflection even more. I do 1-day retreats where we dive completely into your chart, look at, for instance, the Mercury retrogrades, where are they happening, how can you use that reflective time in your business to really up level, to really go to where you want to grow to. And it's super easy because all of these things are very practical. You don't have to study astrology for many years. I did that for you. You only have to show up, and together we are going to create this beautiful strategy based on your personal chart. If you want some more information about that, let me know and we can chat about it. And I'd love to hear how you're experiencing the Mercury retrograde. And I'm wishing you an amazing full moon tomorrow, and I will speak to you again very soon.